In today's video, we revisit the mean streets of Mordheim, Games Workshop's Turn of the Millennium fantasy skirmish game. Well, hi folks, and welcome to the channel. I'm Lee, your old hammered host. So the other day I was reading a February 2021 TechRaptor.net interview with game designer Tumas Purian, who, along with Rick Priestley, Alessio Cavatore, and a very dedicated and talented production team, created Games Workshop's classic Mordheim fantasy skirmish game, which was released back in 1999. Here's something I didn't know. When asked where the idea for Mordheim originated, Tumas said the game was inspired by the real-world Y2K crisis, where many people believed global computer networks would crash once their internal calendars tried to flip over to January 1st, 2000, leading to varying levels of financial chaos and societal collapse. In Mordheim, of course, the apocalypse is localized to a single city, which in the final year of Warhammer Fantasy's second millennium was host to a giant bacchanal brought on by the sight of a prophetic twin-tailed comet in the sky. Farmers left their fields, craftsmen abandoned their tools, nobles neglected their noble duties, and all of them joined the giant hedonistic rave in and around the city of Mordheim under the glow of the oncoming comet. Unfortunately for all those happy party people, however, said comet slammed into Mordheim like the Wrath of Sigmar. Everyone inside the city, as well as many revelers outside the walls, were instantly killed, and the city itself was shattered, scorched, and filled with toxic clouds of smoke and particulate. However, after the dust settled and the fires died down somewhat, bands of brave and/or foolhardy adventurers discovered there were treasures to be looted within the hazardous ruins of Mordheim, including the highly prized shards of Weirdstone, mysterious comet fragments that were more valuable than gold and rumored to have magical properties. In the TechRaptor interview, Tumas says that, quote, Mordheim started the fantasy ruined city post-apocalypse game subgenre, unquote, which obviously includes current games like Frostgrave from Osprey Wargames. Tumas also says that even though Mordheim is more than 20 years old, the game might actually be more popular than ever right now, thanks to the internet and a hardcore fan base. The Mordheim Facebook group, for example, boasts more than 21,000 members, and there's also Broheim.net, an extensive and growing online library of both original and fan-made Mordheim content. So basically, hobbyists can download the Mordheim rules for free, as well as a host of other scenarios and material. So why is this quirky offshoot of Warhammer Fantasy still so popular, even though official support for it faded after 2004? Well, let's talk about that. As many wargaming commenters have noted over the years, Mordheim was to Warhammer Fantasy what the first edition of Necromunda was to Warhammer 40k, a street-level skirmish game pitting gang against gang in a gritty, violent setting that existed within the much larger and well-established Warhammer sci-fi and fantasy universes. But because Necromunda is set within the bowels of a hive city, and Mordheim takes place 500 years before regular Warhammer Fantasy, game designers were free to expand upon existing Warhammer lore somewhat, introducing new factions, stories, and characters without disrupting anything established in the main games. Mordheim gave hobbyists a new way to battle within the Warhammer Fantasy universe that was both small-scale and character-driven, as opposed to gigantic rank-and-flank clashes between opposing armies. Plus, Mordheim's campaign mode gave warbands the opportunity to collect treasure, gain experience, advance in skill, and acquire new gear, giving it the feel of an unfolding adventure rather than just a one-off game. Also, the post-cataclysmic setting allows Mordheim players to explore a limitless variety of conflict zones, ranging from scorched city streets to flooded riverfronts, rat-infested sewers, and crumbling cathedrals. Mordheim warbands can even leave the city's boundaries altogether, venturing into surrounding villages and woodlands, or seeking their fortune in far-off lands like Nagaroth or Lustria. And then there's the game's distinctive tone and visual style. One might describe the Mordheim aesthetic as morbid, irreverent, terrifying, absurd, violent, and often hilarious. There's definitely a sense of ruin, madness, and constant peril, but at the same time there's something quite farcical about warrior nuns battling giant rats and zombies for shards of a celestial comet that's been scattered throughout the wreckage of the region's biggest party town. So Mordheim manages to be both gothically dark and whimsically cheeky at the same time, never taking itself too seriously. The Mordheim rulebook and supplements, for example, are sprinkled with humorous illustrations and quips, which make the books much more entertaining than your typical rule sets. Now, a wargamer could easily play Mordheim using figures from the main Warhammer Fantasy line, or from almost any fantasy wargame for that matter, but Games Workshop doubled down with Mordheim, creating a wide range of bespoke figures for the game. For example, regular Warhammer zombies would work great for a vampire's entourage, but they're simply not as cool as the Mordheim zombies sculpted for the Undead Warband set. Here are some figures from the Carnival of Chaos, which was a later warband featured in the Empire in Flames Mordheim supplement. Then there's the fearsome Thing in the Woods, the monster for the woodland scenario of the same name, also featured in Empire in Flames. Here we have an Amazon warband suitable for plundering the jungle ziggurats of Lustria. And here is a Mordheim Pitfighter warband, which reminds me somewhat of the miniatures from the old Gwar Rumblin' Antarctica Skirmish game from the late 1990s. Games Workshop also published a surprising amount of supplementary material for Mordheim. The original Mordheim rulebook itself was expanded upon in supplements like the previously mentioned Empire in Flames, articles in Fanatic magazine, and a Mordheim-specific publication called The Town Crier. Much, or possibly even all of this material, you can find archived on broheim.net. Bottom line, Mordheim was and is a quirky skirmish game set in the Warhammer Fantasy universe, with a dedicated line of very cool miniatures, a unique graveyard humor aesthetic, a campaign system, and lots of supplemental publications. So it's very easy to see why it is still venerated by players old and new, even though the original rules might seem a bit clunky by today's standards. And yeah, the original Mordheim minis are a bit scarce these days, but thankfully there are plenty of suitable proxies available from companies like North Star Military Figures and Wargames Atlantic, as well as 3D printed sculpts and files available from a myriad of sources. With all of those options, frankly, it's probably never been easier to assemble a custom Mordheim warband. So why did Games Workshop discontinue Mordheim? I certainly don't have the definitive answer to that. The online consensus seems to be that the game simply wasn't bringing in enough money, perhaps didn't fit into GW's evolving business strategy, or was always intended to have a limited lifespan. If you have any insight or theories regarding this topic, please leave a comment in the comment section because inquiring minds want to know. There's also a consistent rumor that Mordheim might return someday, since Necromunda enjoyed a successful relaunch in 2017, and Games Workshop is currently working on a Warhammer Fantasy reboot entitled The Old World. So is it possible the Old World release might include some sort of Mordheim reboot? I don't know. If Kill Team and Necromunda can coexist, perhaps there's room for Warcry, Warhammer Underworlds, and Mordheim underneath the GW umbrella. I guess we'll just have to see. Again, if you have any insight, thoughts, or conspiracy theories, please leave a comment. Okay, folks, that's a wrap on today's visit to the legendary city of Mordheim. Its name may have been stricken from the Empire's official historical records, but its fan base has never forgotten it. Thanks as always for stopping by. We hope you enjoyed today's video. We'll be back soon with some more tabletop wargaming madness, but until then, take care of yourselves, and we'll catch you next time.